Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 11 of Outlaw Star. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, Jean and the crew had gotten involved in this big interstellar race, in part because the McDougal brothers are involved in some way. Now, they did have to pay a hefty sum in order to get involved in the race, which will put them in significantly more debt should they not place in the top 3. But all of that just kind of falls by the wayside for the time being, as during part of the race, they began to get sucked into a gravity well trying to hit one of the checkpoints. So, when you really get down to it, debt might not be that bad when you compare that to, crash landing on what I believe was like a small star or a planet, Not good stuff. So perhaps understandably, we're picking right up where we left off, and the unfortunate thing is that Gilliam has informed the crew that there really is no way out of this, It's an unfortunate thing where the only way out is through, so you're just gonna kind of have to floor it and hope for the best. Now, the other interesting thing about this race is that, ignoring the McDougals, putting them aside for one moment, you also have Eijitan who has entered the race. How she obtained the money is unclear, but what is clear is that she still has a bone to pick with Jean and company, and she's probably gonna, take any opportunity that comes her way to take a swipe at him, I don't recall if violence was explicitly forbidden in this race, but whether or not it is, I feel like violence is gonna happen quickly, Like, a lot of these racers, of those we're familiar with, namely the McDougals and Eijitan, I get the feeling that they're pretty, predisposed to violence. So, things are kind of going okay for the Outlaw Star. Jean has managed to hop a couple positions in the race, but he's still only 6th place. Meaning, if things continue at their current pace, then, he's not going to place in the top 3, and therefore he will be significantly indebted. Now, Suzuka here, she has made the right choice of not really getting involved. Last we saw of her, prior to this little stint on the beach, she was placing a rather large bet on the Outlaw Star, like a significant sum of money, which would also come with significant odds, considering that the Outlaw Star is a rookie ship with no racing experience. Yeah, the interesting thing here about this race is that it seems to be a really long-term kind of thing. Last episode it was mentioned they were racing for 14 hours to get to that first checkpoint. Jim's mentioning maintenance and taking an hour to just fix things up and do all that. I guess it's kind of like a pit stop in Formula 1 or NASCAR, things like that. Because, like, you know, I feel like you can really only expect your ship to run at high output for so long. You know, like, I feel like there are different kind of classes, as it were. Some ships might be able to run at, you know, relatively low levels for long periods of time, but at the same time, like, sprinting isn't a long-term thing. Ooh. So Jean has decided to confront the pilots of the El Dorado, you know, who he believes to be the McDougal brothers. So, I guess Jean doesn't really know it at this point, but he has sort of latched onto the younger McDougal brother. And unfortunately, things might get kinda hectic, you know. His fellow racers are already drawing, like, switchblades and things like that, so they are on a space station. You can't exactly draw guns and all that, but that's not going to prevent things from getting interesting. Ooh. So, I guess, Jean called the McDougals bluff, and it, didn't really work out in his favor. I mean, the information about why Jean and the Outlaw Star are wanted by pirates, you know, that would be good to know, but, I don't know. It's not even necessarily true that, McDougal here would know about why it is, you know? Because, like, the McDougals are hired guns, you know? They don't necessarily ask questions, you know? I wouldn't be surprised if they had a policy of, you know, not prying into what their clients want and all that. Or why they want it, rather. So the racing protocols are kind of interesting. You know, you can't, like, necessarily leave right away, like, once you dock in. And I guess that kind of makes some degree of sense. Like, I feel like that's kind of a feature of, like, NASCAR racing and Formula 1. Like, people leave at different times. It's sort of a weird thing. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but I can kind of get it. But the key issue here is that Jean naturally wants to catch up to the McDougals and, you know, settle things one way or another. But, you know, they're described as being 11 minutes ahead. And I feel that it's kind of interesting that things are described in terms of units of time rather than distance, because, you know, when you're racing around in space, like, you're dealing in astronomical units, which, you know, naturally get very big and hard to visualize. So I guess the interesting thing is that if Jean does want to catch up to the El Dorado, you know, he's really gonna have to open the throttle. Oh, that's interesting. Aisha Clan was ahead of the McDougals. And, you know, that's no longer the case, but I find it interesting that she must have been doing really well in the race. Oh dear. So already she's going for it, you know. She's not really interested in the race. She's far more interested in attacking the Outlaw Star and setting up an ambush, which, you know, it's interesting, you know. Because on the one hand, the ship she's in isn't really equipped. But on the other hand, you know, I feel like she's gonna come up with something, you know. Like, they're sort of drifting through an asteroid field currently. I wouldn't be surprised if the ship had, like, manipulator arms with which to start shifting asteroids, you know. Or I guess, failing that, I wouldn't be surprised if she attempted to ram the ship, you know. She seems to be that level of fanatical and borderline suicidal. I mean, on the one hand, you can't really blame her because her life has taken a sharp downturn ever since she first tangled with Jean Starwind. But on the other hand, I feel like you have to get to a point where you just let things go. I mean, she's clearly not at that point yet. I feel like maybe a failed ambush in an asteroid field is just the thing she needs to realize the error of her ways, but I don't know. I mean, knowing her as I do, she also seems to be the type just to, not really learn from her mistakes either. If she was the type, then maybe things wouldn't go as they have. Ooh. Okay. So rather than setting up like an ambush, they're setting up what appears to be a false distress signal. And I reckon that this is probably a ploy to get Aisha on board, I wouldn't be surprised if that was her goal here, because in terms of purely hand-to-hand combat, I reckon Aisha's probably got the better of everyone on the crew currently. Like, Suzuka might be able to do something, with her sword, but I don't know. Oh, dear. So I guess this is the issue, Jean's going out into space to help the poor pilot here, or who he assumes to be the pilot, but this strikes me as incredibly dangerous, because when it turns out that this is Aisha Clan, she's gonna, start initiating stuff, Well, I take that back. She didn't start stuff out in the void of space. Perhaps she has the sense not to do such a thing. But, man, that's gotta be an unwelcome surprise on Jean's part. Bet he wishes he could really just, void the airlock and be gone with her. I mean, from a certain perspective, that would probably be the best thing to do. Just open the hatch and, hope everything sorts itself out. Oh. Alright. So it seems like they're, forming a bit of a truce for the time being. Aisha finally believes that Jean doesn't actually know anything about the galactic ley line, and that, the McDougalls do instead. Therefore, they would be better off not fighting one another and instead turning their combined attention on the McDougalls. So I guess the real question is, what are they gonna do with Aisha? She's, clearly not a serious person. You can't put her to work in any serious capacity. And I feel like the best thing you can really do is just sort of keep her somewhere to minimize the damage she can cause. Because I feel like, left unattended, she would really only cause trouble. Even if that trouble is only eating through their stores of food, that's a big problem when you're in between planets or space stations or what have you. I mean, already she's just causing trouble, getting in the way, blocking monitors. Oh dear. So meanwhile, Suzuka, she really is just, enjoying her life in perhaps the best way possible. We saw her on a beach listening to the radio. We see her at a spa, When you really get down to it, she had the right idea. Because I'm certain that whatever she's doing or whatever she intends to do or plans to do, it's gotta be better than slumming it in the ship for this race, Because, we know from the start to the first checkpoint, that was 14 hours. Who really knows how long it's been in total? It's probably been well over a day, Oh dear. So things have gotten very interesting indeed. The Outlaw Star is being attacked as they're trying to enter subspace, and, that's not a good place to be, because you can't exactly abort the process but, you also don't want to get attacked without the ability to sort of turn around and defend yourself. So Jean's just kind of winging it, but that's never a good thing when faster than light travel is involved, and it seems like things have gone kind of sideways in the most literal way. The explosion sort of shifted them off course, so they've traveled to who knows where, how far off course. Yeah, alright. So that was the handiwork of the McDougalls here. And Harry, as they call him, claims that, that's probably the end of the Outlaw Star. Having been blasted while entering lightspeed, they probably got torn apart by the turbulence. And, fair enough. But the trouble is, even Gilliam, the shipboard computer, has no idea where they could possibly be going. And when you're moving at relativistic speeds, that's gotta be a real big problem. What happens if you get a little too close to a star? In all likelihood, you get sucked right into the gravity well, and that's the end of you. In, really short order. It is good that Eijitan is more durable than most, seeing as how, despite the, calamitous reemergence into normal reality, everyone's kind of suffering from it. And even the ship has lost power. Granted, they still have emergency systems and they can still sort of turn it back on, but to cut the power like that, that's no good thing, generally, electrical and electronic systems don't like being turned off abruptly. It's not really good for them. So the question is, now that, everyone's sort of okay, the idea is, what's going on? Where are they relative to the race? Can they still win? What happened? So, they seem to be, kind of far away from their destination, but given that we're operating in stellar terms, it's kind of hard to say how far away they actually were. Of course, the trouble is, some of their subspace reactors aren't working optimally anymore. The idea is that the race is probably a bit of a lost cause, I mean, Gene's kind of unwilling to let this go, mainly because, the debt's on him if they don't win this. So, I can't exactly say I blame the guy, but, things are looking pretty grim indeed unless Gene comes up with a highly irrational and improbable plan. Wow. It's interesting that Eijitan is sort of kicking everyone while they're down here, saying oh, you guys are just gonna give up? Oh, you're gonna cry? I mean, that's kind of rich coming from her, considering she was, essentially press-ganged into washing dishes. She certainly seemed to be despairing, but, it's also not exactly true that everyone was wallowing in self-pity here. They're trying to figure out what to do here. And, Gene has an idea that's probably gonna get messy really quickly. Ooh. So Gene has mentioned something rather dangerous, He says, I don't care if we win or lose. That doesn't bode well. But, I mean, the idea he's trying is gonna be interesting to sort of, enter an ether stream. It seems like that's a borderline suicidal thing to do. And the only saving grace is that the Outlaw Star is a rather remarkable ship, which, may be capable of such a thing, but, I don't know, this strikes me as, I don't know, what would be comparable? Because I don't think ether streams are a real astrological phenomenon. I feel like this is like comparable to riding like, I don't know, like a solar expulsion, like whatever you call it when like a sun or a star ejects mass, like riding on that for propulsion. Like, when the stars eject matter, you know, it's like plasma and stuff like that at like superheated temperatures, so to ride on something like that, you have to be like, you know, really durable or really careful, and it kind of strikes me as inadvisable. Like the ether streams here, they seem to be partially a natural phenomenon in kind of a similar vein, so I guess the Outlaw Star being in some way related to the galactic ley line, you know, maybe this is all kind of tied together, and therefore, having been built for this purpose, you know, it can sort of ride the ether stream without, you know, cause an undue concern. It's interesting that the race organizers are like, you know, hey, like, what's going on here? This is not good, but, ooh. Well, there we go. You know, the stunt paid off, and even though the race official chastised him for it, you know, Gene and company are in first place. And that's something, you know. It's not clear how much of the race is left. You know, they've hit the 4th checkpoint, but we don't know how many there are in total. But they could very well win. Oh, well, I take that back. You know, so 1st and 2nd place are already spoken for, but yeah, there we have it. The Outlaw Star came in 3rd. I thought it might have really come down to the wire at the end with another candidate for 3rd place, but not so. Ooh. Alright, so due to a technicality on the race, I guess the Outlaw Star didn't come in 3rd place, you know. They came in 4th by a hair, and therefore, Gene owes Fred that much more money. Suzuka lost all her money. Yeah. Oh dear, indeed. So, things have gotten dangerous indeed. Aw, Jim, you don't gotta debase yourself for Fred like this, man. Ah, dear. So, Jim has seen fit to sort of like kind of hold up the end of the Outlaw Star's bargain, as has Aisha Clan, but more importantly than any of that, it seems like the El Dorado, the McDougals, have a message for Gene. No doubt it, well, it's got to be important and, in all likelihood, very dangerous. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.